Welcome to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
I'm Shannon Lawrence.
And I'm MB Partlow.
Quick content warning before we get started. This podcast may contain language and disturbing content, so enter at your own risk.
Oh, hello. Howdy.
There you go, a new one.
I was like, I need to say something new this week. I'm not sure why, but I needed to say something new.
And you've done it. I saw you did a food review on a place up in Woodland Park.
It's so good. It is so good. I'm sorry. Mountainera. I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, it's like Mountainera.
Yeah. Mountainera. I know that word is in the title. The chef is wonderful to talk to. And it's a small place. It feels very much like you're going into a little family, which is what it is, a little family Italian restaurant. The food was so good. The olive oil, my God, I've never been so excited about olive oil.
Infused?
It wasn't. It's just really good quality olive oil, and it was fruity and light and a little citrusy. I was like, what is this? It's from Shamrock is where he gets it, because I asked, and I'm like, I have to go see if I can get some.
They have a store. They have a warehouse store. Okay.
They do, and I've been in it. But I didn't know to look for this particular brand of olive oil. Now I will.
Yeah, and is Basil and Barley shut down? Did you ever eat at Basil and Barley?
I did not, and I believe it is still open. I think he must have sold his interest or...
Oh, okay. I saw that recommended in that food group all the time during the pandemic.
Yes.
So, and I still haven't tried it, but... There are only so many places I can go. So much time.
Yes. There are only so many pizzas I can eat in a week. I mean, realistically, I could eat pizza every day, but...
I could not. I get bored of pizza. I don't because the family does pizza when we do the movie night, and I usually go get something different. But then I get bored if I get the same thing too often there. So I got to space it out.
I get it. You said you would buy me a drink, too.
I did. Fuzzies.
I'm looking forward to that.
Painkiller?
I was... So Shannon posted a photo on Facebook that looked like... I don't know what it was, but it looked like a margarita with an entire bottle of champagne upended into it.
Yeah, it was mango and strawberry margarita mixed together, the frozen, because they have the machines at Fuzzies, and then a bottle of champagne.
Was it a split?
It was yeah. Because they also have the ones where it's a Corona upside down.
Okay.
So if they do those, and this one was a champagne one, I was like, well, I'm going to try that today.
I just was like, that looks fabulous.
I went like a week later and got the painkiller because I didn't see it till after I ordered that. And it's like, what was it? It was a regular lime margarita. And then there was coconut rum in it. For some reason, even though I don't like coconut, if it has coconut rum in a drink, I'm like, I need it. So there's coconut rum in it, and then 2 kinds of fruit juice. I think it was like pineapple and orange, and then dark rum, a shot of dark rum poured on the top. Oh, it was good.
That sounds good.
It did kill some pain for a little while.
I did not know you were a coconut rum girl.
I don't know where it's come from. I don't like coconut.
I don't know.
But then I started doing coconut more on keto, right? And then I got used to it. But coconut rum will get me every time. I like it in a drink, like in a fruity...
It is fairly tasty.
...drink. Yeah. It adds something to it that I like for some reason.
I had dill pickle moonshine.
Oh, God.
It was delicious. I can't believe I'm saying that. It was like a big jar of pickles, dill pickles, that were soaking in moonshine. So I had a shot of that juice. Moonshine.
I also just don't like moonshine.
I don't either. It's too harsh. I'm like,
we don't have to do this anymore.
Exactly.
You can have coconut rum, you guys.
We've evolved beyond it.
My grandpa was a runner for a while, a moonshine runner. And apparently at some point, I don't know, supposedly he took my 2 uncles with him.
My grandma's brothers, because they came over from England to Canada to the U.S. So they were like, oh, yeah, we'll just skip across the river. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I found out, too. I know, I posted this. You probably already saw it. That Coors was, and possibly still is not allowed in Oregon. because it's not.
Oh yeah, you were talking about Smokey and the Bandit.
Yes.
I love that
Because of what I watched Smokey and the Bandit a billion times as a kid, right? But I didn't understand why they were doing it. I didn't particularly care. I was watching for the car stuff and the funny stuff.
Yes.
But then when I watched it again as an adult, I was all, what? And so I had to look up Coors. Why would you have to run Coors to Georgia? And then found out that because it's preservative free and because it's not pasteurized, that it wasn't allowed east of the Mississippi. Well, I also found out for those same reasons it wasn't allowed in Oregon. But California did it. They didn't outlaw in California. So like Oregonians would run down and get kegs or whatnot and come back up, or they'd get a few 6-packs and come back up. My aunt actually responded, yeah, my brothers used to go down and get that, and they'd bring me a 6-pack.
I remember when I lived in Virginia Beach, which was in the 80s.
Yeah.
I left there in 92. You could not buy Corona in Virginia.
Huh.
You could buy it in North Carolina. So I had a coworker who lived just over the border in North Carolina. And at one point I dated some guy who loved Corona. So every once in a while I'd be like, will you bring me a 6-pack? I'd give him some money.
That's the thing. Here in America, we can make shit as illegal as we want to. It's still going to come in. But
yes.
okay. But yeah, so why Corona? Is it
I don't.
They're like, no Mexican beer here.
I don't know. And it seems like you could get it in restaurants. I don't remember. It was a thing.
Well, and so my sister and her girlfriend have just been out in Oregon, and her girlfriend posted apparently Coors is illegal in Oregon, and I'm like, wait, still? But here's the thing. It is really, really hard to find Coke, like Coca-Cola in Oregon. Everywhere is Pepsi. They are owned by Pepsi, okay? Now, as somebody who needs to have a Coke and who hates Pepsi, by the way, but it's different formulaically and therefore doesn't work for the migraine, I was not a happy camper in Oregon when I discovered that. So I'm wondering if because it was illegal for so long, just nobody carries it anymore. So I don't know if it's still illegal or not. I just find that intriguing. Like, of all things to make illegal is a beer.
Yeah.
The weakest thing you could possibly get with alcohol in it.
Right.
Other than, say, a chocolate that has some sort of liqueur in the center of it.
I haven't watched the Smokey and the Bandit movies in a million years.
I love them. I have to watch them every once in a while.
I have been looking for Every Which Way But Loose.
Oh, yes.
And it's not
on something. Wait.
Oh, is
Jeffrey was watching it on something. It might have been Prime. I don't know where he's watching it.
Okay, I'll look for it again. Last time I looked for it, I couldn't find it.
But I was watching for it too, and I still have the mail service where you get, it's not Redbox, but it was the Netflix by mail. And I tried to order it from them, and then it was like, nope, we don't have it. And I'm like, why does nobody have Every Which Way But Loose?
Because weren't there 2 or 3?
There were two as far as I can remember. And one of his wives he was frequently in movies with his wives.
Yeah.
Look up trivia on that, by the way. No. He's a dead bastard. Like, he was a terrible person to his wife. That wife especially. I don't know about other ones, but that's in the trivia on the Every Which Way But Loose when I looked it up on IMDb, and I was like, son of a bitch. I think he forced her to get an abortion or something like that. I don't want to commit to that, but I think it was something like that.
It was something awful.
And I'm like, that's funny considering his politics. But again, their politics are always, it's not okay for you. It's only okay for me.
Yep.
So, yeah, man, I did not like looking at it because I grew up on Clint Eastwood. Do you know, like
Dirty Harry?
Yes, that he was the freaking 80s. Like,
yes,
and also his westerns. Though my mom was big on westerns, and so I grew up on westerns. And then you're looking at freaking John Wayne and Clint Eastwood are two like reprehensible human beings, and I'm like, okay, I have to. I'm too connected to these things from my childhood. I'm not giving them up. You know, like. And anyway, they don't get money from me since I already have the things. You know what I mean? So, whatever. It's like Jeepers Creepers. If you already own the DVD, go ahead and watch it. Since he was a horrible, child molester. Yes, it does not have the original guy associated with it. I still
won't watch it because...
The problem is Jeepers Creepers is a really good horror film. And I hate that.
Me too.
But I haven't watched it since I heard all of that.
Oh, you know what you made me think of when you brought up Smokey and the Bandit? Remember... the song, and I think it was actually even a movie, Convoy.
Yes. I watched that recently with Chris Christopherson.
Oh my God.
That's also on Amazon, I think, maybe.
So when the girls were younger, we had this CD of crazy hits Purple People Eater. It had Convoy. It had all kinds of songs like that. And they would sing them. We would sing them on our car trips because, we're crazy. We drive everywhere. It was like a couple of years ago. I'm not kidding. If they're listening, they're going to be like, I fucking hate you. Because they talk in the song Convoy, they talk about the bear in the air.
Yeah.
They thought they were bears. And I was like, they're police. They're state police. And why do they call them bears? I said, that was the CD slang for cops was bears. Mm-hmm. And they were like, all these years?
But that's like, I thought, what is it? The Pledge of Allegiance? There was something about witches stands.
Oh, to which it stands. For which it stands.
For which it stands. I always said it, witches stands. And so I'm like, why is there a witch in the pledge? So I thought it was great. That was before I stopped saying it.
Right. Oh, our podcast had the desired effect. So a few episodes ago, I made a point of saying how tall I was to bug a particular listener. And the day that episode came out, it was Amy. I just get a text from her and it says, "You're 5'6". Fuck you." I was like, because we did all those Facebook Lives together. And when I'm home, so it's for a clothing store. So if I held up a dress or something, I would say it's about to my knee. It comes to the bottom of my knee and I'm 5'6". To tell people. And she's just like, and I don't know, early on it became a bit because she's like, sure, I'm 5'6". Show off how tall you are. And I'm like, 5'6" is not tall. But yes, so when I said it on the podcast, I knew she would hear it and know it was for her.
Yeah. It was clearly aimed.
And yeah.
I'm 5'8.5". Still.
Stretch. I'm going to call you Stretch from now on.
What do we watch? We watched Maverick, the new Top Gun. Finally.
Oh, I was like, oh, wait, the one with James Garner.
Oh, I love that one.
Right?
Right? Oh, it's so good. Because that one has
the new Top Gun?
No, I was talking about Maverick. But I love the scenes with, God damn it. I've loved him forever. The Native American actor. I know his name, you guys. He was the first Native actor whose name I knew. Anyway, the whole scene where they're doing the dumb Indian shtick, and then he's clearly like afterwards quite savvy, and it's just to get money from. Okay. Anyway, the new Top Gun was good. If you like Top Gun, I saw a lot of hate for it. Look, it's just war agenda and stuff like that, and I was like, okay, but some of us just like to watch. There was a whole time period, maybe early 90s, late 80s, I don't know, where there were these flight movies. Yeah. There's one with Louis Gossett Jr. And I loved him. I would watch anything he was in as a kid.
Clint Eastwood did one. It wasn't a flight movie, but he was... The
space one?
No, where he was before that, in the late 80s or early 90s, where he was the drill instructor. Wesley Snipes was in it. He yanked the earring out of his ear.
Oh, yeah.
There were a lot of military...
Yeah, there was, and when you if you rewatch Top Gun, there's actually recruitment posters showing a bunch of scenes behind them. So it was active recruitment. I watched for that. I didn't see it in Maverick. So, because all the people look at them and say, oh, here's all the things that you can do in the planes, and don't you want to come join the military now? I did not see the active recruitment element that I saw in Top Gun. But anyway, he stands next to this guy who's supposed to be... Well, that's probably a spoiler. He stands next to this young man who's towering over him. Mm-hmm. And we all know that Tom Cruise doesn't like to let people tower over him in movies. Because he's a short, sad little Napoleon of a man. Anyway, I just had to...
Yeah, he is.
I'll watch his movies because he gets good movies and I hate that.
Yeah.
Same reason I ever watch Kevin Costner movies. He gets some really good roles and I hate him. But I will still watch.
I have never seen a Mission Impossible movie.
Oh, well, see, I quite enjoyed them, but I love action flicks.
I like action flicks. I'm like, maybe I'll try one because Simon Pegg is in them.
Yes, he is.
And I love Simon Pegg.
Yeah. And there's a couple other actors I like in those movies, too. Yes. So again, I'm like, oh, fine, I'll go see it. But anyway, I was like, wow, he's come a long way if he lets somebody tower over him in a scene. And then there's a scene because Jennifer Connelly is his love interest in Maverick. And there's a scene and he's taller than her. And I'm like, is he really taller than Jennifer Connelly? And I meant to look that up, and I was like, I guess he hasn't come long enough to be able to let a woman tower over him. And yes, you can argue he was married to a woman who's, what, almost 6 foot? Is she 5'11"? I don't know.
I don't know. She's tall.
And she joked when they finally divorced, now I can wear high heels again.
Yes.
But I think that, like, he wore lifts and, he's not willing to be shorter. And I'm like, just face it, dude. You're short. Embrace it. You're a fucking multimillionaire. Deal.
Oh, you know what was so sad? Speaking of men who are not tall. Leslie Jordan died.
Who? Oh, yes.
That
My
was
daughter
so
loved
sad.
him.
I loved him.
I did too.
Oh, when
but I had to show her, and it was the day after my mom's dog died.
Oh God.
I'm sorry.
But him on TikTok during the lockdown, he was just like, "Hey there, hunker downers," and
yeah, he was delightful.
I loved him. Sad. I loved him on Will and Grace. Mm-hmm. I loved him on different stuff.
Well, he was in that more recent one. I kind of stopped watching with David Alan Grier.
Oh no! Oh yeah, with Vicki Lawrence.
Yes, David Alan Grier. I did
watch that. I watched the whole thing. Who the hell else was in that?
See, I can't remember the fourth person. Jeff Kitt. That's terrible, and it's probably somebody that'll be like, "Duh," and that I liked. I think I liked them all.
Yeah, you would definitely. It would be a duh moment. It was the cool kids.
Yes,
yeah. I quite enjoyed that. It was completely mindless sitcom, and I think I only watched it for Leslie Jordan and Vicki Lawrence.
Which is funny because I watched it for Leslie Jordan, though I was lower on. I had really just discovered him more. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I was watching it for David Alan Grier from In Living Color and all of that, and Vicki Lawrence. And what the damn it, that's gonna drive me nuts.
I know we're gonna at the end of today's episode, we'll be on the computer looking that up.
That's right. It's trying to figure out who it is. Okay, I guess it's a good time to start.
Yeah.
If you're thinking of starting a podcast or even just starting to research it, Buzzsprout is your go-to source for information and hosting. They have tons of videos and write-ups on everything you need to know about recording and distributing a podcast, and they even provide easy ways to get analytics on how your podcast is doing. We use Buzzsprout for our podcast hosting, and through them we've been able to connect with tons of resources and distributors. Following a link in the show notes lets Buzzsprout know we sent you, gets you a $20 Amazon gift card if you sign up for a paid plan, and helps support our show. A win-win. Not only do they help you get started, but they also do small things to encourage you, such as awarding you badges as you hit various milestones. Join over 100,000 podcasters already using Buzzsprout to get their message out to the world.
I'm doing the Babysitter Murders. So, in 1979, a horror film about a babysitter came out. A Stranger Calls. Starred Carol Kane as the babysitter and Charles Durning as a cop.
Was it really Carol Kane?
Yes. Young.
She wasn't 17, though, back then. Was she? No.
Probably not.
No,
they never
she's
are.
older than I am. So, anyway,
they're in their 20s at least. In the film, the babysitter receives a series of phone calls in which a menacing voice asked, "Have you checked the children?" Mm-hmm. I love that. It's just, his voice is so...
I didn't see it, but I remember hearing about it.
You didn't see it?
I did not.
Oh my God.
I was too terrified to see it. I was a babysitter.
So was I. But you know me, I love a situational horror, and if it can be something that I actively do, I'm all about it. So when she finally calls the police, they discover the phone calls are coming from inside the house, and they call her. It's an absolutely chilling movie with a scene that when I recently rewatched it as an adult after all those years, I still got goosebumps during one of the scenes. It is so effectively done. It's such a good movie. I did rewatch the second one, which is a lot harder to find. And it's fine, but it's not like the first one.
And didn't they remake it?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think I saw that one, but I remember nothing about it. The first one will always be the one.
Yes.
So what people may not know is that the film was likely inspired by a long-running urban legend, which in turn was likely inspired by the real murder of a babysitter in Columbia, Missouri, which is funny. There was something in Columbia, Missouri in my last episode. Oh, yeah. In 1950, it's also felt that Halloween was partially inspired by this. And the original title of Halloween was The Babysitter Murders.
Oh.
So,
I knew that.
Oh, man, it corrected the name. What was her name? I think it's Christman. So, we're going to go with that. It auto-corrected to Christmas. Jeanette Christman was born... That's terrible. Was born March 21st, 1936. Her parents owned Ernie's Steakhouse, and the family lived in an apartment above the restaurant. And I think it still exists, or it did until recently, because there were recent pictures of Ernie's Steakhouse still in the downtown of this. Little town. On the night of March 18th, 1950, 13-year-old 8th grader Jeanette had agreed to babysit 3-year-old Gregory Romack, meaning she would be missing an 8th grade party that night that all her friends were going to. After all, though, she had her eyes on a lovely suit she intended to wear for Easter. I think it said it was at Macy's, and she was saving up her money. It was sleeting outside, a spring storm that had kept most crimes at bay that night, so it was otherwise a really calm night for the cops. Even so, Mr. Romack instructed her on how to use his shotgun, which was kept near the door, and told her that if anyone knocked on the door, she should turn on the light to check before answering it. Though it was a small town where most people kept their doors unlocked, the Romack home was somewhat isolated. It was out. It actually, this is going to cause problems later. It was kind of on the border of the city and partly into just county where there was nothing affiliated. So that's why. But I'm like, wow, like you send your kid over to babysit and they're going to get a lesson on his shotgun.
I was going to say, I grew up in a rural area and babysat at a lot of isolated houses, and nobody ever said, let me show you how to use my gun before I go.
Yeah, nobody showed me where the weapons were anywhere, but I was just going to, I always had a plan. I knew where everything was anyway. All right, there's the snow shovel over there, and there's the kitchen knives, and but anyway, he did that, and he left her. Gregory was already in bed, a radio playing because it comforted him, and she'd been told, go ahead and leave that radio on. And I slept with a radio on at that age. Now I have to have real big white noise with a fan and air movement. But confident that Jeanette was equipped for the night with their shotgun, the Romacks left for their party at about 7:35 p.m. At 10:35 p.m., the police department received a phone call. On the other end of the line, a frantic girl was shrieking hysterically and uttered, "Come quick," before the line got disconnected. She had no time to say who she was or where she was.
Okay.
And while the call was traceable at that time, the telephone company didn't staff at night.
Okay.
So
I get it. I mean...
Yeah. So they're like, fuck. What can you do? Mrs. Romack called home at one point. There was no time, but probably after then 10:35, to check on Jeanette and Gregory, but found the phone line to be busy. She got a busy signal. And she probably, you've got a babysitter. What do you assume? They've called their friends.
Yes.
Yeah. So she didn't think anything of it. She returned to the party. But when they got home around 1:30 a.m., they found the porch light was on, which it was off, except if somebody came to the front door, she was supposed to turn that light on. The front blinds were open, so somebody had turned on the light and looked out front, so it seemed like somebody had knocked on that door. So, they're like, okay, they get to the door, and it's unlocked. Now, when they left, they made sure she locked the door, but the door was unlocked, and the shotgun was still resting in its place against the wall. They went further inside, and that's where they found Jeanette's body on the living room floor, surrounded by blood. Gregory was fast asleep in his room, so probably the radio playing kind of saved him from that noise and responding to that. Police were able to trace the events of the crime pretty clearly. Jeanette had fought for her life quite hard. A side window had been broken into, and it appeared her killer had grabbed her while she was on the phone, which was still off the hook, lying on the floor, with its, however long the cord was at that time, when the Romacks got home. They had struggled down the hallway and into the living room, because they walked into complete disarray, things knocked.
Okay.
She was fighting.
Good.
And in the living room, she had been clearly raped. There were many wounds on her body sustained during the fight, including scratches on her face, a contusion on her head from being hit with a heavy object, and puncture marks on her face and head. She had ultimately been strangled to death using the cord of an iron. Now, there are crime scene photos of both of these, if people want to look them up, if you love to look at a dead body, I suppose. And there are pictures of the dead bodies of the girls I'm going to cover. I will not post those, but I am probably going to post one crime scene in her part of her leg and foot are visible in it, but it's to show the living room around her.
Okay.
So I will probably be posting that one. He hadn't gone unscathed. There was blood and tissue under her nails, and hopefully a whole lot of bruises. Police felt the perpetrator was familiar with the home, though I couldn't find anything definitive on what made them think that. I doubt there's much to find your way through. If there's a girl standing there screaming on a phone, you can find her pretty easily. But but they kept saying that, so I'm throwing it in there, whatever it means. When asked about likely suspects, the Romacks both mentioned a man named Robert Mueller, who Jeanette was also known to have babysat for. He'd actually asked for her to babysit that same night, and she'd said, I'm babysitting for the Romacks, so he knew where she was. Mr. Romack told police that Mueller had commented to him that he admired her well-developed form.
Which means he made some gross comment.
Yes, and Mr. Romack was very bothered by it. He would go on the stand and say it and everything too, but he told police. So, just a reminder, she was a 13-year-old girl. She was actually only a couple days from her 14th birthday. And you'll see from pictures I posted of her, though, she was very developed for a 13-year-old 8th grader.
Okay.
She was and when you look at pictures, I looked at her, I thought they were the wrong pictures. She doesn't look 13.
Okay.
She looks like she's at least 18.
But he's still, if she's...
No, I'm saying it's completely inappropriate. I'm just saying... because of his comment, well-developed, and because I will be posting these pictures and people will be like, well, that can't be a 13-year-old. I'm telling you now, she doesn't look 13.
Okay.
But she is. She weighed 135 pounds at the time of her death. She was tall and she was curvy. So, so she probably put up... Because when I'm picturing a 13-year-old fighting somebody, I'm picturing my daughter is tiny. I was tiny. I was tall, but tiny. She is tall, but tiny. That is not. So she probably, I hope she hurt him. It's basically the short version of that. Mueller also stated to him after the crime, I might have done it and forgotten it. I do that. Yeah. So, anyway, Mrs. Romack also said that Mueller had run his hand along the back of her dress when they ended up alone in a room together in a social situation, and she had not felt comfortable with him since then. So this guy was a perv. Okay. That's the short version of everything I just said.
Yeah.
And the Romacks didn't like that. Like so they were instantly like, you know who did it. Mueller, that's who. Finally, Mueller was known to carry around a metal mechanical pencil that could have been used to make the puncture marks on her head. Bloodhounds were brought in and traced the trail to a street a couple blocks away, but lost the scent. It kind of hit a more major thoroughfare and it was gone. So they couldn't trace them. As with other high-profile crimes we've covered, the town suffered terror that a crime like this could happen in their midst. Hardware stores sold out of locks and latches. Maybe think of the town that dreaded sundown, right?
Yep.
Women refused to answer the door, and no one would let their teens babysit anymore. Yeah. The local emergency number was actually changed from 4 digits to 3. At that time, it was just local. Oh. And they changed it to, I think it was 113. So for those who are curious, 911 was not used until 1957 when it was proposed by firefighters wanting one universal emergency phone number because before that, people had to call, I want the police, I want the ambulance, I want fire. It was further developed in the 70s, then there was more in the 90s. So it was a process for 911. Which is probably, that kind of makes sense to me why in the 80s, no, it's the 90s when Rescue 911. With William Shatner. Yes. I loved that show. Okay. While bloody fingerprints were gathered, they never helped identify anyone. Mueller was interviewed and given a lie detector, which he passed, but it has since been stipulated that he used connections to get him off for the crime and remove evidence, possibly. He sued the police, saying they violated his civil rights, but he lost. Eventually, he joined the military and left, dying in his 80s in California. So if he did it, that makes me mad. I wonder if any other crimes happened around him in the military after, because how many people have done that?
Oh, yeah.
Including, like...
Go to a new place.
Yeah, and then there's new crimes there and they can't be connected. So it's like, I'm like, did anybody look into that? And I also could never find, because she had tissue under her nails, if they checked him for scratches. There was nothing about that. I'm like, hello, Chekhov's gun. You can't just throw out evidence and then not close that shit. Come on, bad writers. No one was ever arrested for her murder. Part of the problem was that the location of the house, like I said earlier, was at the very edge of the city. And so whether it was municipal or not, so the city and council police fought actively over who was going to cover this crime. And so they kept communication from each other on purpose. So nobody had all the information. There was bungled police work. It was an absolute atrocious mess.
That's fucked up.
In 2010, the case was brought up again. A historian attempted to pursue an investigation, but found that all the evidence had disappeared. No fingerprints, no blood for DNA. They would have had DNA. She wanted to look into whether this case was connected with one that had occurred in 1946. It was the evening of February 5th, 1946, and 20-year-old Mary Lou Jenkins was home alone. Her father was working in Kansas City, and her mom had taken a job as an overnight nurse in a home not far from her own. She had to report to work at 10 p.m., and she had Mary Lou lock up behind her when she left, which included latching the hook on the screen, so you know that's internal, and then locking the front door while her mom stood there. The house was visible from the home in which Mrs. Jenkins works. They had a system in place. Should anyone come to the house at night, Mary Lou was to open a specific window, turn on the light where it would be visible, and call her mother. At 10:15 p.m., a nearby couple heard a terrible scream. That's in quotes. Terrible scream. They thought it was their rabbit, so they didn't go out to check it out. And I'm like, you heard your rabbit screaming and you didn't go check if there was a fox? How do you hear? And they described like extensively the scream and how horrifying it was. And they were like, but we didn't go check because we thought it was our rabbits. So you were just going to let all your rabbits die? Like that bothered. I was like, what the fuck, neighbors?
Yeah, that's fun. That's
so weird. Just thought it was the rabbits being brutally murdered. It was fine.
Yeah.
At about midnight, Mrs. Jenkins saw the light was on in the window and the curtains were open, but she had never received a phone call, so she figured her daughter had just gone to do something and opened the window. So much for the system.
Yeah.
And she returned to work.
Oh.
She got home at 6 a.m., finding the light still on, the screen door unlatched, and the front door locked. She pounded on the door, trying to wake Mary Lou, finally breaking in through a window to get inside. She had sort of a step thing outside until she moved it, and she climbed in her window. There she found her daughter on the living room floor, battered and dead. Her pajama bottoms had been torn and pulled off, and an electrical cord was wrapped around her neck. She had been badly beaten.
Yeah, doesn't this sound familiar?
Yep. Being a nurse, Mrs. Jenkins removed the cord and tried to resuscitate her daughter to no avail, and I can't blame her.
No.
This being Missouri in the 40s, young black men were brought in and questioned.
Of course.
This was the norm if anything happened in the area to a young woman. Police even went to the all-black school at that time. It was still segregated, and made all the boys line up in the gymnasium to be examined for scratches, as there had been tissue beneath her nails as well. Neither of these girls went easily.
Good.
Yep. On February 23rd, a black man named Floyd Cochran was found at the dump. He was caught drinking lye water in an attempt to commit suicide. God, that would be terrible.
It would.
Police took him in and called a doctor who recommended he be committed because he had trouble remembering his own name. He had trouble remembering other people's names. His siblings were called in, who agreed. And on February 24th, they went to his house to get his wife to sign commitment papers. There they found her dead. His wife had been shot twice with a 12-gauge shotgun, I think, in her shoulder and her head. Citizens speculated that he must have also been responsible for Mary Lou's death, which was nothing at all like his wife's death. An officer spent 2 nights questioning him extensively, intensively. We know how that goes.
Remember his own name, but yeah, let's question it.
Well, here's further to that. Floyd was known to be mentally impaired. When he'd been called in for the military draft, they had tested him and discovered he had the developmental age of a 10-year-old. So, 2 nights of questioning on somebody with that mental capacity. He did have a connection with the Jenkins family. He was sometimes paid to haul their trash to the dump. And so somebody had like this whole theory on there, and it was, he went to collect his money and they didn't give it to him, and so he went back all mad and raped and murdered. No, stop. Officers stated that he'd confessed to Mary Lou's murder during that intensive questioning, and on May 7th, 1946, he pleaded guilty to his wife's murder, for which he got 15 years. Then they started his trial for Mary Lou on May 27th. This is before protections were in place for somebody who, From the beginning, the odds were stacked against him. 20 years earlier, there had been a lynching of a black man for the supposed rape of a white girl in that very town. The jury was all white, even after Floyd's lawyer. I have to say, his lawyer fought for him, and I don't know if the lawyer was white or black. But he really did try to do right by him. So even after Floyd's lawyer argued that this was unfair, the judge... Again, surprising me, the judge said, okay, let's order a whole new jury panel and let's ensure that there are African Americans on this panel. And so they did this was the first jury panel, so that's the people called in initially to be questioned and chosen from. The very first in Missouri history to have black citizens on it.
Oh my God.
But by the end of the panel, they had all been removed and the remaining jury was all white. Mrs. Jenkins was seated next to the jury. They sat her right next to the jury where she sobbed loudly throughout the trial. You're not allowed to do that anymore.
No.
But then, absolutely. So his lawyer argued that it was prejudicial, struck down. His grandfather testified that he'd been home all night with him and could not have committed the crime, but Floyd was still convicted of Mary Lou's murder. His lawyer did everything in his power in the original trial and in appeals, but he was never going to win the case. Not in Missouri. He took it to the Supreme Court, and the Missouri Supreme Court basically flipped him off. You know, Floyd was convicted and put to death in the gas chamber really quickly, like we talked about last time. He was unable to say the Lord's Prayer because he couldn't remember the words, even though 2 chaplains tried to help him say it. He was in his 30s at the time of his death on September 26, 1957. Mary Lou's house wasn't far from the Romax house. In the years between the 2 crimes, there was a series of rapes by a man who broke into homes wearing a mask, and with one of the girls, he even put a mask on her as well. Another black man was arrested for 2 of these crimes in 1949 and forced to confess by being told by police that if he didn't confess, he would be lynched like his grandfather had been. Ultimately, these threats actually led to his release, and he was not convicted.
Wow.
Because, he went to him. Somehow it got out that they had made these threats. And so it was all overturned and a jury did not convict him. It should be noted that Mueller, who I mentioned previously as being a suspect in Jeanette's murder, was known for making masks. He was involved in community theater or something like that. George Spencer, the prosecutor on Floyd's case, began to question Floyd's guilt. So the prosecutor, when this new case happened, went, oh shit, I fucked up. And apparently he had already started suspecting that when the 2 of the rapes happened. So he actually opened in 1953 a private investigation into Mary Lou's murder, examining assaults that had happened in the years surrounding the 2 crimes. He very much wanted to know. And her family eventually realized that the wrong man had been convicted too. But he's never been pardoned posthumously or anything like that. And when this prosecutor died, he left all of his investigation results to a local historical society or something because he wanted the information out because he really felt he'd done wrong. So I had some appreciation for that, considering the time period. But still, it's not like he got it overturned, so it wasn't perfect. But I can appreciate that he was like, fuck, I fucked up, right? In the probe, he discovered that Mueller had gone to school with Mary Lou Jenkins. Mueller, again, that first guy who thought 13-year-old was so well-developed, had also gone to school with the 20-year-old victim. He was a couple years ahead of her. And that's it. I mean, unfortunately, there's no evidence for sure to time to it, whether that's because he had friends in high places or because there simply wasn't evidence, which could also be because, again, stranger murders are tricky, but he wasn't a stranger. He had some sort of association with both of these girls.
Right.
And I don't know about the other 2. I tried to look up extra stuff on them. And that just, you know what? Rapes weren't going to make the papers like that.
No. It's hard to find those records.
Yes, it is. It's kind of frustrating. Still an unsolved mystery, but
that is.
He sounds real good for it.
Yes, he does.
Yeah. And that pisses me off that he got to live to 80 then.
Yeah.
That's with no consequences. And he probably continued to commit these crimes when he moved, and he just knew to better cover up. But the mechanical pencil was damning, but I'm like, did anybody examine the pencil and see if there were bits of blood? I mean, I know you could clean it, but with a mechanical pencil, you'd think that was hard. I know they were metal.
Right. Yeah. There's so many questions. We don't know. Maybe it was examined and it didn't have any.
Right. Which that frustrates me about the scratches too. Okay. Well, both those girls managed to scratch their attacker. Did they ever make him take his shirt off? Did they ever,
or roll up his sleeves?
Which is usually because they were both asphyxiated with cords. Yeah. So there would have been shit on his arms. And all he had to do was wear long sleeves, right? And then nothing. So those are the Babysitter Murders. And now you know what all this shit is sprung up from.
Where it came from.
Yeah.
The evil, dark, twisted roots of the story.
Yes. What are you going to talk about?
Oh, God. Well, I'm going to talk about murder.
Really?
So, I didn't come up with a good name for this. I came up with a name, but I'm not even going to say it because it's not a good one.
Because it's not a good one. Okay.
No. So, thanks to my True Crime a Day calendar, I hope if someone buys me another one. Because I get so many story ideas off of that damn thing. Anyway, because of that calendar, I became aware that in the 1950s in Sydney, Australia, there were dozens of cases of poisoning by thallium, which was an ingredient in rat poison. Where I wrote, "What the hell, Australia?" So I'm like,
they didn't have some cyanide?
I'm like, your weather and your wildlife isn't bad enough. You've got to start poisoning each other. So I picked 2 cases to highlight. So make of my choices what you will. These were the 2 that, and what happened this was after World War II. So you had people coming home and people moving to the cities, and there was a housing shortage. People were packed in, and there was a very big problem with rats in the city. That is why thallium had been banned, but the government decided to make it available again because there was such a problem with rats. Like, yeah, you should have thought twice about that one. So, Caroline Michelson was born in Sydney, Australia around 1890. It wasn't clear. She was born between 1888 and 1890. So in April of 1908, she married Richard William Grills, and the 2 of them had children together. Now, the very first thing I read said they had 4 sons together, and something else said no, they had 5 sons and a daughter, but 2 of the sons died young, unfortunately.
Yes.
One of them
wasn't uncommon.
Well, one of them was a lifeguard. He worked as a lifeguard at a beach and pulled a corpse from the water and got typhoid. Yeah.
That's terrible.
Right? It is.
Oh my God.
Isn't that gruesome?
Yes.
The couple lived in a series of rented houses while Richard was a real estate agent. And in 1948, and this is going to be important later, Caroline's father died and she inherited his house in Gladesville. I say that like I know where Gladesville is.
Oh, absolutely. Gladesville.
Gladesville in Sydney, it's in the place with the thing and the stuff. So Caroline and Richard had a large extended family. And Caroline, just to draw the picture, she was a short, plump woman with thick glasses. She was everybody's favorite auntie. She liked to visit her family and her friends, her in-laws, and she was known for the tea and cakes and biscuits that she enjoyed serving everyone. On May 11th of 1953, Caroline Grills was arrested and charged with the attempted murder of her sister-in-law, Evelyn Lundberg, and Evelyn's daughter, Christine Downey. The 2 women had been suffering the effects of thallium poisoning, which includes loss of hair, nervous disorders. I didn't follow up on what the fuck does that mean? Progressive blindness, loss of speech, and eventually death. So both women's symptoms got better when Mrs. Grills didn't visit. What a surprise. So Evelyn Lundberg had already gone blind when her son-in-law, John Downey, happened to be present during one of Caroline's visits. And this was after other thallium poisoning had made headlines. So this was not uncommon. He saw her carrying a cup of tea and then observed her dipping her hand into her pocket, then holding it over the tea as though dropping something in it. I'm acting this out. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Apparently just for Shannon's
Thank you. I appreciate it.
This clever young man, and he really was clever, I think, he was able to switch the cups of tea, and he took that cup, poured it into a bottle, and took it to the police for testing.
Good.
And it contained a lethal dose of thallium, and later traces of thallium were found in that pocket of her dress. So once Caroline was in custody, officials began looking into other deaths of people close to her. They suspected her in the death of her stepmother, Christina Michelson, in November of 1947. Remember that house she inherited from her father? Mm-hmm. A clause in the will said that her stepmother had life use of the house. So as long as that woman was alive, she got to live in the house.
Huh.
Yeah. So it's believed that she
took care of the problem.
A relative of her husband, Angelina Thomas, in January of 1948, her husband's brother-in-law, John Lundberg, in 1948, and a friend of her stepmother's who died in 1949. Two of these bodies, and it didn't say which ones, two of these bodies were exhumed and found to contain lethal amounts of thallium. The remaining two had been cremated, so they weren't able to test those remains. So Caroline was originally charged with murder in 3 of these cases, but the charges were dropped, and she was then prosecuted for the attempted murder of Evelyn Lundberg and Christine Downey, the ones they had the most evidence for. So the prosecutor said, I had to copy this because I'm like, Jesus. The prosecutor said, she was a killer who poisoned for sport, for fun, for the kicks she got out of it, for the hell of it, for the thrill that she and she alone in the world knew the cause of the victim's suffering. Okay, that's a little purple, but she didn't help her case because during the trial in the courtroom, she would spontaneously burst into laughter. Yeah, that doesn't...
Oh, wow.
So it took the jury 12 minutes to come back with a guilty verdict. She was sentenced to death, which was later commuted to life in prison. In October of 1960, she was rushed to the hospital where she died of peritonitis from a ruptured gastric ulcer.
Ugh.
I'm like, if you poison people...
You deserve it.
You're gonna... Yeah. By the way, because she used thallium to poison her victims, the other inmates in prison referred to her as Aunt Thally. So, by the way, thallium, and here I already talked about why it was so readily available. Because of the housing crunch and the wicked plague of rats. The thallium being readily available was not good news for a man named Robert John Lulham. He was born in 1926. He was an Australian rugby player in the 40s and 50s. And for those who care about sports ball facts, he was an Australian international and New South Wales state representative 3-quarterback. He played in Sydney for the Balmain Club, with whom he won the 1947 NSWRFL Premiership.
All right.
I don't know what any of that means, except... he was a really good player.
Yeah.
And he was a high scorer and he had a lot of promise. He was a well-respected player. He married a young woman named Judy, and he was on track, some say, to becoming a superstar in the world of rugby until the 1953 season. There was a game in mid-July which his team lost, and his teammates and his coach noticed that he was not playing at his usual level. He said he was just having an off day and that nothing was wrong. But when he returned home that evening, he called his doctor, and the doctor came over and diagnosed an ulcer. So 2 days after the loss, while Lulham was still bedridden, the doctor received an anonymous phone call from a woman who claimed her husband had poisoned Lulham's beer before the game. He went to the same place, the same pub or...
Yeah.
little place, I think it was actually a bar in a hotel, and had one beer, 1 pint every day at the same time. He never believed that this was possible because he sat by himself. It was just his thing. He went, he drank his beer, he went home. Or he went out and fucked other people. That was a thing too. Anyway, so the doctor immediately reported the call to the police, and Lulham, whose condition was deteriorating, was moved to a hospital. And as soon as doctors and police realized Lulham's hair was falling out, they deduced thallium poisoning. Because he was a sports star, there was a huge media frenzy about this and the news that he had been poisoned. Some people even tried to claim that he poisoned himself. I'm like, yes, because anyway.
Uh-huh.
So everybody was like, was it a rival team? Was it a jealous teammate on, somebody on his own team? Was it an overzealous fan?
Jealous husband?
No, it was his mother-in-law.
Nice.
The one he'd been boinking.
Ugh.
Yeah.
No.
Right? Is that not the biggest ew?
Yes.
So in 1952, Judy's mother, Veronica Monty, separated from her husband and moved in with her daughter and son-in-law. And they had not been married very long. They'd been married less than a year when she moved in with them. And 3 times, Veronica had sex with her daughter's husband. The relationship between the married couple was not good, and the mom said. And Lullum seemed indifferent to their home life. So she was talking to him about he needed to pay more attention to his wife and to his home. She also talked to him about another woman that he might have been having an affair with. Veronica claimed that she felt horribly guilty after all this happened.
Oh, please.
And she made herself a Milo. That is a chocolate malted powder similar to Nestle Quick. So it's like she made herself a hot cocoa, because I think they said it was a hot drink. She made herself a Milo and dosed it with thallium. But then Judy and Bob also wanted a Milo, so when she prepared the additional beverages, she got them mixed up, and her son-in-law ended up with the one with the poison. Mm-hmm. I'm not so sure, but still feeling guilty, she confessed. So they go to visit Lullum in the hospital, and as they're leaving, the mother confesses all to her daughter. After Veronica was arrested, the entire story came out in court. It turns out she had made the bogus phone call to the police, trying to throw suspicion away from herself. Like, yeah, you did a great job. All is not well that ends well. Because of the poisoning, Lullum never fully regained his health and was unable to continue as a rugby player. Well, keep your dick in your pants and none of this would have happened. Judy divorced him shortly thereafter.
She divorced her mother?
Well, no, but it doesn't say. Veronica's husband promptly divorced her as well after she was convicted, but before she was in prison. She tried to poison herself again with thallium, but was caught and taken to the hospital where she recovered.
Like, you may not have any more Ovaltine, lady.
Yeah. So, because she did try to poison herself, I'm like...
Maybe she really did try to poison herself the first time.
Yes, but... Still in all, I'm like, and like I said, there were dozens of these cases. So eventually, they did take thallium off the market and make it illegal again. Like, how many people have to die?
So they'll just use Visine instead.
Yeah. Was Visine? When did Visine come out?
Oh, no.
My sources, the True Crime A Day calendar, Wikipedia, Murderpedia, Reddit, and the Canberra Times.
Nice. I read Fuzz by Mary Roach. I've previously read Stiff by her about
I loved
dead
Stiff.
bodies.
What was Fuzz about?
So she basically went around. She's funny. I love her writing.
Yes.
She went around and talked to various wildlife experts on various things. And it was basically like, how do you take care of problem animals? So it started with bears.
Okay.
Like in Aspen, did you know that they're not allowed to have the type of door handles I have here where it's just like the swoop off to the side because the bears can get in?
Instead of a round knob.
Instead of a round knob.
Yeah. Oh,
and so those that do defy that rule or whatever, they get bears in their house a lot of the time. So it was like, how do we deter bears? And I just thought of this because, that all of these processes, they talked about rats. They talked about bird problems because more plane crashes, like... Airports have to try and get rid of birds because if a bird goes into your engine, you're going to go down, right? And so they're a huge hazard. And then they talked about like tigers and leopards. She went to India. She went to all these places. Oh, and I have to tell you, like I knew already that tigers are more violent and more likely to attack humans than, say, lions.
Okay.
I already knew this fact. Tigers have been man-eaters more often. It's why the lions of Tsavo, or however that's said, that were the ghosts in the darkness, were such a big deal. Because lions typically don't do that. But tigers are like, I smell a tasty snack in there. I think I'm going to go in and eat it. But leopards will attack. There was this town in India, and all these people were being wiped out by leopards. And they would attack in the middle of the day when there were other people around. They attacked students walking back from their school buses in the middle of the day. Like, leopards are some scary little bastards, I found. But anyway, and then, yes, rodents and stuff, how to control them. And so, of course, it comes down to how many different kinds of poisons can we try? And then before, there was not this movement of we need to have humane poisons or humane traps, like glue traps. I can't believe those still exist. They're horrible.
Yeah.
Absolutely horrible. But there's so many other people. Don't use glue traps. Stop. They have nerve endings too, But anyway, and so it's like this progression of studies on how to, okay, well, what poison would be the most humane? What's going to kill them as painlessly and quickly as possible? So it just makes me think of that, like all the things they've gone through and the things that have been legal in the past and all of that stuff. But yeah, the bears were eye-opening because, we have bears around here and we know the basics. Like they put it out in the news all the time of what to do if you run into a bear, what to do if you run into a mountain lion, because we live in the urban wildlife interface. But there's so much more in like Vail and other places that they have to talk about. And brown bears tend to be less likely to be violent against humans. That includes grizzlies, as a brown bear, by the way, than black bears. And so there's that. But here's the problem. You can't always tell the difference between a black and a brown bear because some black bears are brown and some brown bears are black. Or they have mixed colorations, right? So you can't just look at them and know if you don't know how to tell the difference, like snouts.
Yeah, when you're looking at it on the trail and filling your shorts with...
Right, and it's coming at you. Grizzlies have pretty distinctive faces, so probably you can tell a grizzly. Yeah, but other than that, if you've got a black bear and a brown bear, you don't know which it is, and they're like, you're supposed to behave differently depending on which kind it is, right? So like one, you got to clamor and make noise and make yourself big, and the other one, you're like, lay down and play dead. I think that might have been the grizzly, so that would be brown bears, but I don't remember for sure. See, that's the problem. I've always had that they're like, if you run into a mountain lion, do this. If you run into a bear, do this, right? I don't remember which is which, so I'm just gonna, I guess, try all the things.
Yeah. Scream, cry,
but
run.
Like the problem, what a big problem it is in Vail was so interesting because, okay, that's a ski town here in Colorado full of a bunch of stupid rich people. But so they're not going to follow the rules because they're above rules because they're stupid rich people. Am I wrong? I'm not wrong. Okay, so they have dumpster ordinances they're supposed to follow that they don't follow. They have specific dumpsters. They had to replace them in town with these dumpsters. And then but some people, they won't latch them because it's too much work to unlatch them. So what's the point in having the new special? So they come in for the food. They're going to find easy food, and that might be in your house or an alley behind all the restaurants, right? And so she's talking to these wildlife experts on, well, what can we do? And they're like, honestly, people aren't going to do what you tell them to, so it doesn't matter. And it's a constant frustration. But anyway, fascinating stuff on all these different animals. Like she went and she talked to a guy that works at the Vatican because they have a bird problem there. Okay. Including when she talked about when he let that dove go that he did every year, and then a falcon or whatever swooped in it, and all the kids were like, right? Because they were watching as it got murdered.
That's when you start singing, "It's the circle of life."
Yeah. So he stopped doing it and he started using a balloon. But in order to control birds around there, they use lasers. And in fact, they've shown that these lasers work for whatever reason and farms, but it's too much work to set it up, and people kept getting blinded because if they get lasers in the eyes, they burn their cornea, so they can't use them in places like that. But they can very carefully use them at the Vatican. And then there was one, and they were at a dumpster, and they were trying to figure out how to get rid of gulls. Land gulls, because they have them. I remember being shocked by that when I drove past a bunch in Wyoming, and I was like, what?
Yeah, same thing. I'm like, what the fuck are they doing here?
Totally normal. They're not all seagulls.
Yeah, it's like, bird, you are lost.
So they had a remote control, like basically a drone version of some sort of falcon. It was something that it's actually the fastest land animal. It's faster than cheetahs. Oh. It's in bursts just like it. When they dive, they go 120 miles per hour is their top speed or something. So they've made a remote of this bird because it'll scare away the gulls. And so they test it, but its battery life is so short. It's like 7 minutes or whatever. And they're like, well, that's okay because they only have that energy in real life too. And then they have to land. And they're like, okay, it's just you, because you can't get the battery to last longer. But they're testing it because the people who move nearby don't get the bird crap.
Right.
And also I learned that they used to take at dumps, they would bring in feral pigs to eat some of the garbage. I'm like, what about goats? But anyway, that's what they do in Texas. Goats. But so now they have a feral hog problem.
I would think feral pigs would attract bears.
Round and round you go.
Because to me, dumps mean bears.
Because they're some sort of, they kept introducing things to New Zealand because it's an island. And then each new thing would cause a problem because they brought it into
the rabbit-proof fence.
It's like there was a little old lady who swallowed a fly. They did that in New Zealand, and now they have a stoat problem. Which, from what I could gather in reading this, made me think of like a ferret or a weasel It's a rodent of some sort.
What did they bring them? What were the stoats supposed to combat?
They had rabbits, and then they brought in cats to take care of the rabbits, and then they brought in stoats to take care of the cat. Then they had a cat problem. It was something like that. It's so roundabout. But I was like, at some point, do you not go, we should stop doing this?
One would think.
Because the feral pigs at the dump, and that's U.S., now they trample people's yards and stuff because then they spread out from the dump, right?
And feral pigs are mean as hell.
Right! So they got birds crapping on the cars, and they got feral pigs to keep trying to shut down the dump. And what all the realtors do there, they said, is when they're selling them the house, they're like, oh, the dump's due to close in 2 years, which is not true, but that's what they tell people. So people buy the house thinking that in 2 years it's not a problem anymore. Then they get mad. So what do they try and do? Shut down the dump. And I'm like, well, where do you think it's going to go if they shut down this one? It'll just be a different neighborhood. Mm-hmm. So they're testing a robot bird. It's very entertaining. It's a good book. And she's perfectly willing to say when she misunderstands something or asks a dumb question.
She's written some good books.
Yeah, there's like 6 now on various things. And there's only 2 others that I really care about writing because one's like warfare and...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
When you were talking earlier about the person who thought their rabbit had been killed.
Yeah.
I read a story on Facebook the other day, and this person comes home from work and they go out on their back deck and their dog is there with a rabbit. Oh. And the dog's covered with mud and the rabbit's covered with mud and the rabbit's not moving. So they get the rabbit away from the dog and it's muddy and it's not moving. But there don't seem to be any wounds on it. Uh-huh. So they take the rabbit in the house and clean it off. And the rabbit is still not moving. And so this person is like, I'm hoping that this is one of those animals that plays dead when it's stressed out. So, and they even said, don't judge me. Their next door neighbors raised prize winning rabbits of some sort. And they knew this was one of their rabbits. So their neighbors weren't home. So they snuck over, put the rabbit back in the pen and came home. So they're like living their life, wash the dog, wash all the mud off. And they hear screaming from next door. So they go outside and they ask, totally like, I don't know what's going on. Oh my God, neighbor, what's wrong?
What is that?
And the neighbor says, one of our rabbits died. And the person's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. They're like, yes, it died 3 days ago and we buried it and now it's back in the cage. I laughed so hard when I read that Joe in another room said, what are you laughing at? And I read it to him and he laughed.
That's so messed up. You better come clean at that point.
Yeah. It did. That's where it ended. But I was just like, oh yeah. I said, I'm pretty sure I've even heard that story before. But it still makes me laugh.
So messed up. It's a great punchline, right? Like, it died 3 days ago. We buried it.
And all I can think about is all the times in horror where you see, like Pet Sematary. It was even on an episode of Buffy. I'm sure it's been in many where the animal comes back from the dead. Let me just tell you, if your pet is dead and you've buried it and it comes back, it's never good. It's never, ever good. It's not going to end well. Or it's your neighbor. But I mean, if it's animated, it is never going to end well.
Yeah, no. If anything comes back. That's the whole lesson from the monkey's paw.
Yeah.
Come on. It's a very simple lesson.
It really is. It really, really is.
On that note.
On that happy high note.
We will come back from the dead next week.
Yes.
At a regularly scheduled time.
We shall.
And we'll actually be recording that episode at a writer's conference. So... Yeah, in Vegas.
I know. I've never been to Vegas.
I know. I'm curious
you been there?
Yeah, I've been there several times and I still hate it every time. I am not a Vegas fan. It's scuzzy. It's the dregs of humanity.
And see, I don't gamble, so I'm like, whatever.
On the street, it's the dregs of humanity.
Oh.
So we'll probably have some stories to tell soon.
Hopefully.
Because we will be there for it's a week-long conference.
Yep.
So... We will try new restaurants at the very least.
It's like, yeah, writers conference. Where shall we eat?
I know. It's our friend of the year. We're like, hey, food recommendations?
Yeah, where's a good place to eat? And I don't mind spending some money on food. I don't want to spend $150.
I'm not going to buy a $100 hamburger.
No.
Yeah.
I don't need a gold-plated hamburger.
Yeah. All right.
I guess that's it for this week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram or at our website, mysteriesmonstersmayhem.com.
Please like, rate, and review, follow, and share wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.
Thank you for listening and supporting our podcast. We'll be back next week with more shenanigans.